Hello everyone. Kindly confirm in the chat if you can hear me. Hello, okay, I can see David is here with us. Hello David, you're welcome. Let's drop in the chat if you can hear me. Hello everyone. Just to confirm my mic. Is anyone here with us? Okay, hi Bayo, you are welcome. You are welcome. So let's do well to share the link so that our friends, our colleagues can join us we start. Before we start, let's share the link. You can share it on Twitter, you can share it on LinkedIn so that people can join us. Let's do that. Let's do that. So I'll just post the link again so we can share it to our audience. So let's share the link to our friends, to our colleagues so that they can join. So this is our first meetup of the year, and I'm very, very happy to be here today. And before we do it physically, but now it's virtual. So anybody around the world can always join us. So let's share the link from anywhere in the world. You can join us. This is Fabric Saturday's meetup where we talk about the new baby of Microsoft. That's Microsoft Fabric. So let's share the link to I pasted the link in the chat. So just copy the link, post it on Twitter, post it on LinkedIn so that others can join. So we'll be having an interesting session today. We haven't just want to wait for some minutes so that people can join us and we kickstarts the session. So let's share the link. Let's share the link. Let's share the link. All right, I can see Temitope, you're welcome. Adibola, you are welcome. So I'll paste the link in the chat. Let's share the link to our friends on Twitter, on LinkedIn, so that they can join us. We are about to start the session and we'll be doing a whole lot of things today. So let's share it. Let's share it to our audience so that they can join. Okay, okay. So as we await people to join us, let's just put in the chat what you want to learn today. What do you want to learn about Microsoft Fabric today? What do you want to learn? What do you want to learn about Microsoft Fabric today? Because all we'll be talking about today is Microsoft Fabric. As we know that every third Saturdays of the month is our meetup. That's Fabric Saturdays in Nigeria. Okay, hi Monsurat, you are welcome. You are welcome. You are welcome. So let's share the link. We are about to start. All right. Okay, Temitope says new update in Microsoft Fabric. All right, all right. We are going to be giving you that today. Thank you, thank you. So if you are with us, kindly share what you'll be learning today with us. What would you like to learn today in today's session? What would you like to learn? What would you like to learn? Drop it in the chat. By okay, tips to pass Fabric Analytic exam. Wow, interesting, interesting, interesting. That's the DP600, and I want to believe that most of us now have we are done with the challenge. That's the fabric challenge, so we should be getting our voucher soon. All right, all right. Thank you, Temitope. We should start by 10 minutes past 10. So we just have 3 minutes. So we can still share the link to our friends, to our community. Oh, hi, Francis. Can you hear me?
Hi, Palumi, I can hear you loud and clear.
Yeah, all right. You are welcome, and we are happy to have you here today. I can see some people are already on the call, and they're already dropping their what they want to learn in today's session. So I don't know if you can see it in the chat. People are actually eager to hear from us in today's session.
Okay, good morning, everyone. I welcome us to another monthly meetup. It's been a while. We had struggle trying to get a venue, but now we are back virtually. And the interesting thing is that when we are doing things virtually, people can connect from all over the world. So time and distance is no longer a barrier for us. So we can actually join, and as many people as possible can actually join, and we can always go back to whatever thing we are learning today and watch again so that we can now understand what is going on. So it's always there for us to go back to. Yes, I see new comments. People want to prepare for the exam. People want to see the new updates and all of that. So there are quite a number of exciting updates. Why we are going to be showing some of the ones that we can show. However, I won't be able to still show some because of the limited access to Azure Portal. But the ones that does not involve Azure Portal, definitely we are going to be showing that. So on today's meetup, I'm going to be showing us the new mirroring of database, how to actually copy data from. Confirm if you can hear me, please. Can
Yeah, I can
everybody
hear
hear
you.
me? All right. So I'm going to be showing us how to actually copy data from an on-prem using our pipeline. Before now, what we have is actually to copy data from an on-prem data source using data flow gen 2, which is also a part of data factory. As we all know that data factory is actually divided into two, the data flow gen 2 and also the data pipeline. So before, you can only ingest from an on-prem using data flow gen 2, but now there's a new update where you can actually use your data pipeline to actually copy data. While all of them are also available for us to copy data, it is important to know that data pipelines is specifically good and useful for fast copy. You can use it for your bulk data migration. And now that we have that feature available, we are going to be demoing that. And then I'm also going to be showing us the new folder structure in Microsoft Fabric in our workspace. You can now create a folder system where you can save your work and organize your work, and then things can become very neat as compared to before when you don't have a folder system in your workspace. Also, I'll show the mirror database, even though I don't have access to any Snowflake that I want to mirror or any Azure cloud that I want to mirror. But we are going to be seeing that. So from there, we are going to use whatever we copy from on-prem data source to do incremental load. Now, yesterday on the WhatsApp platform, I was actually messing around with the new Meta AI, where I was asking that how can we make bastard money from Microsoft Fabric? And one of the things that was said that you can actually help organizations to migrate to Microsoft Fabric. And sitting at the center of that migration is you knowing how to migrate your data in large volume, large data into Fabric environment, and being able to connect to your on-prem data source using data pipeline is actually a thing that will come in handy. So we are going to look at that, and then at the end of this session also, we are going to use the data that we ingest into Fabric environment to do an incremental load, because typically we expect that loading data into Fabric environment, especially fact table, is going to be a very large data set. And then you don't want to do complete load all the time. What you want to do anytime you are loading your data is going to be incremental load. So I'll share my screen now. Please confirm when you can share my screen, and then we can just jump into it right away. Kindly confirm when you can see my screen, please. Can you see my screen? Can you see my screen?
Yes, I can see your screen from my hand. I don't know if
Oh,
people can see it from their hand.
all right. So can drop comment if you can see my screen so that we can move on. All right, thank you, Musili, thank you, Nonso, thank you, Flora. So yeah, let's get into it. So first of the feature we are going to be exploring is actually ingesting data from on-prem data source. So first thing first, we are going to be creating a workspace for our demo today. But after today, because the plan for the community is that we are going to be checking various hackathon entries, that we are going to be bringing in experts. So I advise us to use the same workspace and then we can always go back to it. And also we are going to be having a GitHub repository where we are going to be dumping any material that we are using in this community that we can always go back into. So on today's agenda, now there are two types of load really. There is full load and also incremental load. Full load means that every time you want to load 100 million rows of data, you are loading the whole data. But incremental load means that if your data grew by another 10 million rows as against 100 million, you are loading just the 10 million row and not the entire 100 million row. So that way you are not stressing your compute and then you're also saving cost. So let's just create a new workspace. So to do that, you have to create um, workspace, then you click on new workspace. So once you click on a new workspace, then you have the interface where you can give your workspace a name. So I'm going to call my own workspace new workspace. Then as I proceed, I also want to advise us that we should just try and watch it. Every code or any naming convention that I use is still going to be provided at the end of this session where you can use it to follow through. But it's better for us to watch and see how we are going to be doing what we want to do today first, and then we can then go back and check the resource material that is make available to you after this session. So I will call my own workspace new Fabric Saturday workspace. I have one before, so I want to call it new Fabric Saturday workspace. So after I give it a name, I can then scroll down and I click on the advanced section of it where pick the license mode that I want. In this case now my license mode is going to be trial. It's going to be trial. Then I click on apply. So but before that, I actually want to see if it's configured to a large data set. That's large semantic model. So these days now, data sets are now called semantic model storage within Microsoft Fabric. So I can click on apply. So once I click on apply, then I'll have my new workspace created. I think there is this message there is actually distracting. Let me take it out. So my workspace has been created for me. So in my workspace now, so what we want to do is actually to ingest data from an on-prem data source. So what I want to be using for this on-prem data source is going to be our Adventure Data Works. Personally, I prefer to use Azure Data Studio. If you are I am comfortable using Azure Data Studio, but at the same time, you can also use your SSMS depending on what you are comfortable with. So in your Azure Data Studio, I'm going to connect to my local server. Then once I connect to my local server, I have the database, and within that database, I have uh, tables. So the table that we are going to be using today is going to be sales order details. Sales order details. So I'll scroll down and look for my table, which is sales order detail, which is this table. So I'll script this table as top 1000 so that I can then see what my data looks like. So this is the data and the fact table that we want to move into Fabric environment. This is an on-prem data source. So this is the table where you have all these columns. We have your sales order ID, we have your ordered quantity, and then you have your modified date. Now, when you are doing your incremental load, there is always a column that is very important that we use to define the condition for your loading of the data. Now, typically, this column is called a metadata. Now, metadata are data that actually describe your actual data set. For example, when you load data in Power BI, you can see that your data contain 500 rows and 10 columns. That's that's a metadata because that's data is actually giving information about your data set. And then in a warehousing environment also, there are also metadata that describe it. Maybe the last time your data was ingested. In this case now, all these record, the time that they were modified is this modified column. So this is going to be the column that we are going to be referencing for the incremental load for today's session. So in this case now, it's going to give us the date and time and also timestamp. Then we can now specify that this is what we want to do. But before we continue, I just want us to explore this table a bit so that we can know the number of records that we have in this table. So I can just do select count of my table. I can do a select count of my table. I want to know the number of records I have on this table. So from this adventures order table, so I will just paste it right here and then I can see the number of records that we have in this table. So okay, so I think there is a repetition here. Select count, other details, select count, adventures, dates. So I need to add from. So then I will run this again so that we can now see the number of records that we have on our table. So you can see that we have over 100,000 records on this table. And also I had mentioned that the important column. Please, Pelumi, let me know if I'm no longer audible because I'm not sure if I can.
I can hear you
All right.
very clear.
So now we can see that we have over 100,000 records in our table. And then from there, I had mentioned earlier when I actually checked the entire table, the number, the column that is important.
Hi, Francis.
Hi, Kalumi.
Okay.
So so this is our table now. So now I want to see the number of years of record that we have in our table. So I will just try and group it by the table and also extract it out. So not to waste our time. So I'm just passing it.
Hi, Francis. We can't hear you again. Oh, so sorry about that, Bayo. So Francis will be joining back soon. Francis, are you here now? You are talking, but I can't hear you. I think you are muted. Francis, I can hear you. Or can we hear Francis? Just to confirm, can anyone hear Francis? Yes, no in the chat. Okay. Okay, someone already confirm. We can hear you, Francis. Okay. I think it's coming up now. Hello?
Hello, can you hear me?
Yeah, I can hear you now.
Okay. Sorry, I had network challenge. Can you also see my screen?
I can see your screen.
Okay.
Yeah, your screen is up now.
All right. So sorry about that. So so this is what we are trying to do. We want to see the number of years that we have in our data set. So it's incrementally, just for the purpose of this demonstration. So if I run this query right now, I can see that I was meant to run this. So if I run this one, I can see that we have a different number of years. Our data span from 2011 up to 2014. Our data span from 2011 to 2014. So then we can now start to ingest our data into Fabric environment. So I'll go back to my Fabric environment now. So in my Fabric environment, I need to ingest that data into a lakehouse. So I will switch to data engineering experience. So once I switch to data engineering experience, I'm going to create a new lakehouse. So that lakehouse, I'll call my lakehouse new lakehouse one. I call it lake lakehouse one. Then I'll click on create. So once I click on create, then my lake house will be created, and then I have that lake house in the same workspace that I had created earlier. So let's give it a few seconds for the lake house to be loaded. Sometimes it can be dependent on the internet, so I'll just wait for it to be fully loaded before we can proceed. So we are going to be ingesting this table from our on-prem data source, into um, Fabric environment. But the data I want to ingest for now is going to be data for 2011. You can see that I already added a where clause specifying that the modified date is less than or equals to 2011. So I will just ingest that now. So we are now going to ingest for other years incrementally as against loading the whole data set just once. So I will go back to my Fabric environment now. Hopefully my lakehouse has been created. Now that my lakehouse has been created, then I can now ingest data into this lake house. I can then inject data into this lake house. So to inject data into the lake house, there are a number of options. You can either upload file, new data project through a pipeline, or you can use notebook, or you can even do a new shortcut. So but before I ingest data into my Fabric environment, I want to go back into my workspace view, which is my new workspace, and then you can see that you have new here. And that new, one of the new feature is the folder feature. So I can click on folder, then I can call my file incremental load. So let's call this folder incremental load so that every Fabric item we are creating, we are going to put it in this folder. So I call it incremental load, then I click on create. So once I click on create, then my folder will be created. Then I can then move this item into that folder structure. Also, let's not forget that when you create a lakehouse, two other items are created for you. The SQL endpoints, which you can always connect to, and you can use to query the data in your lakehouse using your SQL syntaxes, all that. And then you also have your semantic model, which is your underlying data set. So now we have the incremental folder created. So I'll just highlight this lake house, then I'll click on move. So that will just move the lake house item I have created into the folder that I have just created. So, so I'll click on move. So I don't know, it's not responding. Yeah, so I can now select my folder. So once I select my folder, then I'll move it right here. So now we can see that our workspace is now empty, and then we can then click on the folder and we can see all the items within that folder. So every other item we are going to be creating now is going to be inside this folder, so that in our next meetup, if we are creating another session, you can create another folder for it, and then that way whatever you are doing in your Fabric environment has some sort of organization. Are we together, please? Can you please confirm if we are together and my screen and sound is okay?
Yeah, we are together. I'm with you.
Alright. So now we have created our lake house, but our lake house is of course definitely empty. So we need to move data into this lake house, and one of the various method of moving data into our lake house is going into the layout itself. This is the SQL endpoint. So this is the actual layout. You need to pay attention to the icon so that you won't get confused. This one is the layout and this one is it. So we consider it is empty. So to get data using pipeline, I will need to click on data. Either I access it from here or from all these icons I have here. Anyone is fine. So I'm using the data pipeline to ingest data.
Okay, since we lost Francis, so Francis will join us back soon. I think he's having network issue. Yeah, Francis logged out, so he will join us soon. So, but before you join us, so what have you learned so far? Let's just have an interactive session before Francis join us back. What have you learned so far? What have you learned so far? Just put in the chat what have you learned so far. Just to confirm, can anyone hear me? Can anyone hear me? Hello? Can anyone hear me? Okay, I think it seems people cannot hear me. If you can hear me, just put in the chat so I know you can hear me. Okay, okay, thank you, Flora. Okay, okay, people are already dropping what they learned so far. Learn about incremental and full load. All right, interesting. So let's just drop it. What have you learned so far? I know most of us are not following, and which is the best way. So let's just watch. Okay, I haven't learned something significant. Okay, sorry about that. So we can also share the link so that others can also join while we have Francis back. Okay, okay, I think Francis is back now.
Yeah,
Hi,
sorry
Francis.
guys, Nigerian factor keep happening from network to electricity. Yeah, can you hear me please?
Yeah, I can hear you clearly. Can you hear me?
Yes, I can hear you, Pelumi.
Okay.
So I'm going to share my screen.
Francis, you can just do a recap, probably last 2 minutes. I think people will lost you so that people
Okay.
can actually follow through.
So So what I'm trying to do is I'm trying to ingest data from this on-prem data source into our Fabric environment using pipeline, which is actually a new feature. You can only ingest data from an on-prem source using only new data flow gen 2 within your data factory experience. So but now either you are using your data flow gen 2 or you are using your pipeline, you can now ingest data from an on-prem data source. Now pipeline is preferable for large data set migration as compared to data flow, even though they both have unlimited feature when it comes to data set size that they can ingest. But for your fast copy, it is advisable to use a pipeline. So what we are trying to explore now is that new feature where you can actually ingest data using a pipeline. So I will just go back to creating a new pipeline. So I will reload my screen and I will share Fabric environment.
So sorry we lost Francis again. So sorry about that. So but what we've talked so far is data pipeline. We've talked about data pipeline, and I can also see Musili dropped in the chat. She learned about how about we can use data pipeline to ingest data now apart from Gen 2. Yeah, he's off again. I think his network is really disturbing him. So sorry about that. He will join us back soon. He will join us back soon.
Yeah, can you hear me, please?
Yeah, I can hear you.
So sorry about this network. I'm using all the network I can use, but seems all of them are against me. So I will share my screen again, then we can continue with our session. Hopefully, we won't have any network interruption again. So yes, confirm you can see my screen. Can you hear me and can you see my screen? Hello, can you hear me? I think you are muted.
Yeah, I can hear you. I just want people to answer, and they are answering you already in the chat. They can hear you and they can see your screen, but you stop sharing your screen.
Okay. So yes, we can go back now and then we can have our session. So I'll click on get data using a pipeline. So I'll create a new data pipeline. So once that is created, I'll give this pipeline a name. So let's just call it initial load, initial load. So then I'll click on create. So once I click on create, my pipeline will be created, and then I can now copy data from on-prem data source using my pipeline. So typically it takes few seconds depending on the internet still. So once the pipeline is created, we have this interface. Again, one of the things that happens is that it automatically just pick that you want to copy data, but in our case now we can just close it, then we can then see the interface of the pipeline. This new interface too, there is a new improvement now. You can start from a blank Canva, or you can use a copy assistant, or you can start with sample data. So copy assistant, you can either access it using this new interface now, or you can come to copy data and use copy assistant. So let's use the new feature, which is copy assistant. Then that brings us back to this interface. Now, where are we getting our data from? We are getting our data from an on-prem data source. So in this case, there are a lot of data sources, all categories. We have workspaces, we have Azure data source, and then above here, they are just sample data, but we are not using any sample data. So we want to copy data from a database. And what kind of database is SQL Server? So I'll click on that server. So then immediately I click on that server, then I can click on next. Now remember that if you are copying data from an on-prem data source, then you have to install a data gateway. So I assume that we all know data gateway. But for those that don't know, a data gateway is just like a link connection between your cloud environment and your on-prem data source. So I had already installed a data gateway, but if you want to see how data gateway is installed for the first time, you can actually check the other videos on my channel where I actually did getting data from on-prem data source. So you can see how you can install a data gateway. So to ingest data from an on-prem data source, data gateway must be on. See, it's on-prem data gateway. So once this is turned on and you want to access your server source, then you need to create a new connection. So you switch this to a new connection, and once that is done, you can then wait for this interface to be loaded. Then the server name, so you can always get the server name from your environment. In this case, my server name is uh, is here is here. So this is my server name. So I can just click on this edit connection. So I can see my server name, which is this. So I'll copy my server name and I take that back to my Fabric environment. So in my Fabric environment, I paste my server name. So once I have it pasted, the database where that data is sitting, so I can close this now. Then it is the database, which is AdventureWorks 2019. So let me just copy that, AdventureWorks 2019, which is the name of database, or you can type it manually. So then I paste that as my database. So once it's pasted, then a connection needs to be specified based on the data gateway that you have installed on your local machine. So I can then come here and do a drop down so I can create new connection. So typically, if you are connecting for the first time, you automatically follow through the route of a new connection. But because I had connected severally before, so that's why I have this. So I'm going to click on create new connection. So once I click on new connection, because I have my gateway up and running, it automatically detect that gateway. I name my gateway Stephen and Francis. So I'll pick my gateway, and then the authentication method is going to be a Windows connection. Why Windows connection is because you are copying from an on-prem data set, and that's on-prem data source is actually your own Windows, your own computer. So you pick a Windows connection, and then the username will be the username that you always input when you are opening your computer for the first time. So you put in that username. In my case now, this is my username, and then the password. So you put the password. If you had passworded your laptop, is that password that you input here. So you can always put that password there, and then your connection. There is no need for you to encrypt it. So because if you encrypt it now, it's not going to connect here. So I can then uncheck encrypted connection. Then I will click on next. So once I click on next, it will take me through this journey from choose my data source to connect to data source, to choose data connection, connect to data connection, and then I can review and save. So once this is done for me, then it will give me access into my on-prem data source. Then from there, I can pick whatever data set I want to migrate into my Fabric environment. So now I have this interface. It's either I pick based on tables or based on tables. So let's allow the tables to load. Then we can see the tables that we have in our on-prem connection. So I expect that once this is done loading, all the tables that I have on AdventureWorks database will also be made available within my pipeline. Then I can pick any of these tables that I want to actually ingest into Fabric environment. So I'm going back to Fabric environment now. Here you can see, so let me quickly expand this site so that you can see the name of the table well. So these are all the tables on this database. So you can either pick this table, you can see that it's quite easy. So I can pick as many as possible, and then I then just ingest them into Fabric environment. But again, our goal for today's session is to be able to do an incremental load. So I won't just use pick a table I want to query. I'm going to use a query to actually copy uh, data into Fabric environment. So let me go back uh, into my Azure Data Studio. So here in my Azure Data Studio, I just want to copy the data set from this sales order detail table where the modified date is less than December 12, 2011. So I will copy this query, then I will go into my Fabric environment. So I will change this to query. So once I do that, then I have the interface where I can paste that query. So I will just paste the query that I copied. Then I can preview that data and see what that data looks like. So I'm picking all the columns. So let's start from AdventureWorks, which is the name of the database. Then the sales, which is the schema, and then the actual table is sales order actual table where the modified date is less than this particular date. So then I can click on next. So we have successfully connected to our data source. Now we want to choose data destination. So here I'll then click on next, then I'll have the interface where the data destination will come up. So now I have this destination. Where do I want to move my data into? So in our case now, remember that we had created a lake house earlier. So we are moving our data into a lake house, and typically your lake house is also within your workspace. However, there are other destinations that you can move your data into within your workspace apart from your lake house. You can also use a warehouse, or you can use a KQL. But in our case now, we are moving our data into a lake house, and that lake house is within a workspace. There are other sources, either your Azure destination or your database destination or any other destination, no SQL. So, but we are moving into a lake house within our workspace. So I'll click on that lake house, then I'll also click on next. So once I click on next, then I'll specify that lake house. Remember that we are naming our lake house one. So I'll pick that lake house now, and I'll also click on next. So once I click on next, then I will have this interface where I'll have to specify if it's a new table or an existing table. So in our case now, it's actually a new table. Our lake house is empty, so I'll change it to a new table. So once I change it to a new table, then I'll expect that I have this interface where the mapping would have been done for me. So it will import the schema based on our source schema to our destination schema. So here I need to give my table a name. So the name of that table is sales order detail. So once I do that, then I'll click on next. But before I do that, I just want to be sure that my schema that is being imported is the exact schema that I want. I can see all the source column, which are this, and their data type. Now this is the destination and then the data type. At this point, if you like, you can choose to rename any of the column, but I don't want to do that. So you can also scroll down and then you will see all the other columns. So now that I'm happy with what I have, I can then click on next. So once I click on next, so I'm now going to have a review screen where it's showing us that I'm copying from an SQL server into my lake house and all the connection details. So I can see the name of the table, but the name of the table has like a sort of a special character. So let me go back and change that. I don't want that special character. So I'll take out that underscore, then I'll click on next again, then I'll click on save and run. So this way my pipeline will run, and then it's going to copy that data into our lake house environment. Then I can rename my pipeline. So if I click on my pipeline, I can just come here and call it initial initial load initial load. Then that is done. So let's wait for our pipeline to run. So you can see that our pipeline is running, is queued. And then after it's queued, then it's going to run for a while. So, and that is the end of ingesting data from an on-prem data source using data pipeline. It's quite easy, especially if 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 you have followed how to ingest from an on-prem data source using data flow gen 2, which is your essentially your Power Query online. So our pipeline is running. So the timing it takes to run depends on the size of our data set and also depends on your internet connection. So you can see that this pipeline has run successfully, and then the duration for the running of this pipeline is about 46 seconds. So we can then go back into our lakehouse environment now and see the data that we ingest. So this is our lakehouse now. So it's supposed to be on that table. So I'll click on refresh. So you can see that we have an unidentified table. So you can all just click on refresh again to see the table that has been ingested. To see the table that has been ingested. So we're able to ingest data into our lakehouse using pipeline as our orchestration tool, and we are able to do that from an on-prem data source. However, what we have on our table is actually a fact table that has more than the records that we ingested, but we also want to demonstrate how to do incremental load. So the next step now that we have been able to explore that new feature is that we are going to be creating a warehouse where we are going to be ingesting and doing our incremental load. So this is the table that we have in our lakehouse. So you can explore it, or you can switch to SQL endpoints. So once you click that, you can then query your database the way you would do typically on your data studio. So or even on your SSMS, depending on the one that you want. So I can click on new SQL query, then I can click on select all from. So I can actually do a drag and drop here, and then I have the name of the table. I can see that okay, it's from Lakehouse one and is in this DBO schema. So I can then click on run. So I will then see the data that I have ingested into my Lakehouse. So here we go. So this is the data in our lakehouse, and then we can continue what we are doing. So let's go back into our workspace. Let's go back into our workspace. So our workspace is new Fabric workspace. Now, the pipeline that we created somehow is not staying in our folder. So you can always check it right here, and then you move it inside our folder. So I'll select this and I move it right here. So inside our incremental folder now, so I stay here. So we have created two items. We created a lake house. We also created a pipeline. So the next fabric item we are going to be creating is going to be a warehouse where we are going to be doing the incremental loading so that we can now load the remaining data from an on-prem data source. So I'll pick on data warehouse because I'm creating a warehouse now. So I'll click a warehouse, then I'll give my warehouse a name. I'll just call it warehouse one, and I'll click on create. So once I click on create, confirm if you can hear me, please. And let me know if you are following too. You can just drop comments in the comment section so that I can see that we are following, and you can hear me and also see my screen.
I can hear you from my head.
All right, thank you, Pelu. So our warehouse has been created, but now we can see that our warehouse is actually very empty. So we need to make data available here. Now, another feature we'll be exploring here is cross data. Thank you, Flora. Thank you, Ahmed. Another feature we are going to be exploring here is cross database querying. Now, one of the things that Fabric is bringing to the table is the fact that you can actually do one copy of data within your Fabric environment, within your Fabric tenant. Now, we know that our data is in the lakehouse, but we don't want to duplicate data in our warehouse, but we also need that data in our warehouse. So what can we do is that we can get data using a pipeline or data flow gen 2. But another interesting way you can get data is using your cross database. So for that, we can see that we have warehouses here. So now the warehouse that we created is warehouse one, but we have data in our lakehouse. So I will click on this plus icon. But the caveat to this is that whatever you want to do cross database from, they must be in the same workspace. You can see that our lakehouse is also within this workspace. So I can check on this lakehouse now, then I click on confirm. So this way we sort of provide like a link between our warehouse and our lakehouse. So our warehouse now can access the data in our lakehouse. So we have our warehouse with its own schema. We also have our lakehouse with its own schema. And then the data that we have on our lakehouse is rightly available here, so we can interact with it. But we want to do incremental load within our warehouse because of the full SQL capacity of our warehouse and not necessarily having to duplicate our data. So now that we have been able to add this lakehouse as a cross database into this warehouse environment, so I can just collapse this lakehouse one. So I will stay on my warehouse environment. There is a syntax called CTAS syntax. So I will click on a new query. So once I click on new query, then I think I have generated the SQL code. So I'll just copy the SQL code I want to be using for this warehouse here. So I'll copy, which I'm going to share with us at the end of this session. So I'll go into my notepad where I will actually use this query. So this is the SQL query we are going to be using from here. So I'll copy it and I'll go back into my warehouse environment. So I will paste this code here. And I also added comments. So what I want to do is that I want to actually create a table in my warehouse, and that table is coming from my lake house. So it's just create table as a select statement. And what I want to copy is actually the entire record in my lake house. So this way now I will just run this first part, and I will click on run. So that table will be created. So far the naming convention is consistent. So if you have a different warehouse name, all you have to do is just to adjust this warehouse name or the lake house name, as the case may be in your case. So I have run this part of the query. So then I can come back to my warehouse and see if my table has been created. So if I come to the schema, I come to the DBO, so then I click on table. So under this table now, I expect to see this table, but now I now just have to refresh. So once I click on refresh, then this says other table that we copied into our lakehouse should be available in our warehouse. So yeah, so we have our table, so which we can query directly. So you can query it either from your lake house, from your or from your warehouse. So let's do the option of querying from the warehouse. So if you click on this three dots, which is an ellipsis, you have this option. So you can see that you can either create you can create it as a select statement. You can select top 100, you can drop and create. So I'll select top 100. So once I click on top 100, then the code is automatically generated for me, and then I can see the table within my warehouse environment. So now, like I said, what we want to do is actually an incremental reload. And I mentioned that the column that we are going to be referencing is called is always a column that you can use to identify your data, which is a metadata. So that data is typically within the context of incremental reload is called watermark. So I tried to think about the word watermark and why watermark. Then I thought that when we have a watermark on a file document, it serves as a sort of recognition, or like say like a what's it called? Like a sort of a copyright uh identity. So this modified data, which is a metadata of this data set, is what we are going to be using. And within incremental load, it is called a watermark. It's called a watermark because for every of these data that is ingested, we can identify them using this um, modified column. So to do that now, we need to create another table that is going to be storing this modified date, which is a metadata of this sales order table. So I'll go back to the query that I had created. I'll go back to that query. So so I'm creating that watermark table, which is going to be storing information about the table that we just created. So I will run this part of the SQL script. So I will create watermark table. So I will select this now, and that table I'm creating it within our warehouse. Then I'm calling that table a watermark table, where I have just two columns: table name as column with the factor character and also the watermark value. So the watermark value is going to be the modified date column. So it's going to be storing it right here. So I'll create a table for that. So I'll run this part of the code, then I'll click on run. So once I click on run, then it's going to run this query for me. And then I can see that that query runs successfully. Immediately that query is done loading, you can see that we now have a second table right here in our warehouse. So I want to query this table that I just created, which I expect to be empty. So I'll select top 100. So then you can see that the table is empty. So for now, this table is empty expectedly because it's just a new table I just created. It has not yet been populated. So I'll come back to the query that I paste, then I'll run the part that is just going to insert a record into that table. So which is just using a simple insert statement, and then with your values, you can just insert this record, which in this case now we know that this first character is the table name, and then just putting a default time or date time. In our case now, we know that our modified date is 2011, but in this case now we are using 2010. So I will select this now, and I will click on run. So if I click on run now, then I will expect that this query will run successfully, which will run in about 3 seconds. So I'll come back to that watermark table. So I will run it again. So this time I expect it to have at least one record, which is what we ingested. So we have just one record. So are we together, please? drop comment section if you are enjoying it, if you are following. So don't worry, I'm going to share the SQL code with us so that we can actually follow through what we have been able to do today. So drop comment, let me know if you are following through. So also you can invite others, you can retweet, you can share the link so that you can have a fuller house. So it's only Ahmed that is following me. Thank you, Ahmed. Yes, 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 yes. So let's continue. So we have created our watermark table. Then also, as part of our pipeline that we are going to be creating, we also need to create a store procedure that will be populating this watermark table. Thank you. So that will populating this watermark table. So I need to create a store procedure for that. So this is the SQL syntax for that. So I'm going to create a procedure which I'm going to call this uh, which is I'm going to call write watermark. So it's going to update this watermark table for me. So it's always put the maximum date from our fact table. So I will run this now. So from here, I will just select this and then it's going to create a procedure for me. But this procedure that I'm creating, I am declaring some variable, in which case I'm declaring the modified date and also the table name as a date time and also as a varchar. So then I can select this part of the script and I will click on run. So once I click on run, then the procedure will be created. So it has been created for me. So to confirm my procedure has been created successfully, I can just come to my schema here and I come to my store procedures. So under store procedures, so I can see the procedure that I have created. So this is the procedure. So this procedure will always populate this watermark table that we created based on the last or based on the maximum modified date on our sales order detail. So the procedure will always populate that table. So now that we have created this procedure now, then we can go ahead to create a pipeline that is going to do the incremental load for us. Remember that what we have on our on-prem data source is more than 2011 data. We can see from here, if I run this script again, that we have data for 2011, 2012, 2013, 2014. So but we want to do some sort of incremental load so that we are not wasting resources and also for optimal performance. So let me go back to into my Fabric environment. So within my Fabric environment now, I'm going to create another item so I can go back to my workspace. But before that, let me just close all these other items that I had created so that I don't get confused myself. So let me close all of them. So now we have all the item within our folder. So let me reload this page so that I can also see the warehouse that we created within our incremental load folder. Within our incremental load folder. So I can't find the warehouse here. So let me just go back into the workspace itself. So somehow the warehouse is still here. So we can always move it into our folder environment. Then I will click on move. Then it should go into our folder. So I'll move it here. So now we now have a pipeline for our initial load. We have a lake house. We also have a warehouse. Just like a lake house, we also have another item within our warehouse, which is your data set, But this time we don't have a SQL endpoint. So now we have our new warehouse. So what we want to do now is to do the incremental loading. So we are going to create another pipeline. So we just switch to data factory experience, and then we can create a new pipeline. So that pipeline now we are going to call it incremental pipeline. So I'll do control A, then I will do incremental underscore pipeline. So I'll click on create. So once I click on create, then my pipeline will be created for me. And then I have that interface now where I will then create uh, the incremental loading. So within my pipeline, we are going to be creating a number of activities. As we know, Pipeline is just a sequential arrangement of various activities. So we are back in our pipeline environment. So we have activities. So we have a number of activity. You have your copy activity, data flow activity, notebook activity. But for the purpose of incremental loading, we are going to be using our lookup activity. You're also going to use your script activity. You're also going to use your store procedure activity. But there are other activity too that are available for us to use depending on the transformation that we want to do. We have delete activity, control flow activity, orchestrate activity, and then recently another new feature is that we have a DBT activity. Maybe in our next meetup, we are going to bring somebody from the DBT community to show us something around DBT and Microsoft Fabric. And then also there is also this new activity called the semantic model refresh activity, so that you automate your data refreshing. So for this session now, we are going to be using a lookup activity. So this lookup activity will look up based on the parameter that you are providing. So we are going to give this lookup a name. So I want to give this lookup a name. So let me just copy the name of I want to give to this lookup here. So I'm going to give it a lookup old watermark activity. So I'll go back into my Fabric environment. So I'll give this lookup a name. I'll do Control V. So I have given this lookup a name, but we are not done. We need to also go to the settings tab for this lookup activity. Then once it's there, we need to specify either we are looking up from a workspace or from an external environment. External environment could be your AWS environment, or it could even be your Azure Data Lake Gen 2, or even your blob storage or any of the external data sources. But what we are looking up is actually from a data warehouse in a workspace. So I'll stay on the workspace. Please confirm if you can follow by a reaction or comment. Yeah, thank you, Musli. So I'm actually looking up from a warehouse. So I will click on warehouse. So once I click on warehouse, then I'll see all the warehouse that is available because I have just one warehouse here. So I'll click on warehouse one. Thank you, everyone. So I'll click on warehouse one, and then I can either choose to, I can also expand this place so that I can have a better view. I can either choose to actually look up from a table, or I'm looking up from a query. But in our case now, we are looking up from a table because what we want to look up is our watermark, is our old watermark in this case is that modified date column that I had mentioned earlier. So I will click on table, then I can see all the table that is available in my warehouse. So if I scroll down now, you see that we have watermark table, then it says other table. And these other queries are system generated when you created your warehouse. So we are picking this old watermark for this. So then this way now our lookup is completed. So what this lookup activity is going to do for us is that it's going to look up this watermark and check the last date in which data was ingested. So that is what this lookup activity is doing for us. Then I'm going to add a second lookup activity. I'm going to add a second lookup activity. So that second lookup activity now, I'm going to also give it a name, and that name is going to be lookup new new watermark, new watermark activity. So then I'll also configure it. Also, it's also a workspace, and then the data store is not a lakehouse. We are actually interested in a warehouse because what we had created is in a warehouse. So right from here now, again, you know that the first lookup that we created, we did a query, we did a table. But this case now, we are not going to do a table. We are going to be using query. So I'll pick that warehouse again, and then I have this option either to use a query or to use a table. So the first one I use a table, this one I'm going to use a query. So I'll pick on query. So the query that I'm going to use, let me just copy it from my notepad. Don't worry, I'm going to provide that. So now I'm going to copy this query, which is just a simple select statement, passing wrapping it in a max function. So it's going to pick the max modified date. Then I just give it an alias, which is the new watermark. So I'll just copy that and take it into my Fabric environment. So I'll paste my query in here. Then you need to be sure that the table name is is actually correct, which is says others table. So that is that for this new lookup activity. So we have two lookup now. While the first one is looking up the table, which is the watermark table that has just one record, then this one is looking at the fact table. So we are then going to compare these two dates. So the lookup table for the watermark keeps the historical record of the last time that data was ingested, while this one is going to be bringing the last date from our fact table. So even like this, you can actually run your pipeline. So but before to run your pipeline, you just come to your run tab and then you click on validate. So the essential the reason why you are doing validate is to check if you are properly configured your activity well. So when I click on validate, then I have this screen and then it's telling me that my pipeline has been validated and no error is found. So I can then decide to run my pipeline now that I know that my pipeline is validated. So I just want to run this one first so that we can see what the output of the lookup looks like before we continue with our incremental um, load. So our pipeline is running now. So you can see that it's running. So let me just pull this up a bit. And then we have, so our pipeline is loaded successfully, it has run successfully rather. A minute, please. So now we can actually preview what the output of our pipelines look like. So you have lookup activity doing checking the old watermark, and then you also have the new one too. So for the one that is checking the old watermark, so we have the input, which is going to show like a sort of a JSON file telling us the source and all the things that we had configured. And then we have the output also. So we have the output. So we can see the output of this table. So it's showing us the table name and also showing us the watermark value, which the one that we are defaulted to is actually 2010. You know that we want to do incremental loading for 2011. So I can do the same thing for the one that is checking the new watermark so that I can be sure that it's picking the maximum uh, modified date. So I can check this output now. I can see that the first row also is the maximum date from our fact table. So now the actual copy activity. So I'll go back to my activity. Now I'll click on copy. So I'll add that to a Canva. So that will give me this copy data activity. So then there are four icons at the edge of every activity that you have. You have on skip, on success, on fail, on fail. Then we also have on completion. On completion. So I'll just link on success to our copy activity. And I'll also do the same thing for the second lookup activity. So what do I then want to copy? So I want to copy data from an on-prem. So we need to configure this copy activity. You see that on the copy activity, we have a lot more configuration that we need to do. We need to configure the source, we need to configure the destination, the mapping, and all of that configuration that we have to do. This is the second time we are using a copy activity today. The first time we are using it, we used a copy assistant, but this time now we are adding it to our Canva. So what this pipeline is saying that once these two pipeline runs, then this copy activity should also run. This copy activity should also run. So I'll come back to my copy activity, then I'll come to my workspace, the data store where the data is being copied from. So the source is actually from a warehouse. So I'll pick a warehouse. So which warehouse? That's warehouse one. That's warehouse one. So from warehouse one, actually, I can then paste the query for what I want to copy. So the query I want to use, again, I provided it in my notebook, which I'm going to provide at the end of this session, which is just a simple select statement, which I'm going to explain shortly. So this is the part of the code I want to use. So I'm saying that I want to select every record from sales order detail where the modified date is greater than. Now, this part of the code is what we call expression language within data factory. So now, what this one is telling us is that we are using the output of our lookup activity. In this case, that is why the naming convention is very important so that you don't get confused. So we are saying that where the modified date is greater than the actual the output of our lookup activity. In this case, old watermark activity, and then is also less than or uh, equals to the output of the second lookup activity. Remember that on our Fabric environment, when we check the output of this activity, they are both dates. We have this date for 2011. So essentially, what that query is doing is that is referencing this output. So typically, what you have done in your SSMS is going to be select everything from this table, which is sales order detail table, right? Then I will say where modified date is greater than the last lookup date. I can just type the date manually, maybe is greater than that 2011 or 2010 in this case now, 2010 dash 12 dash 1, and it has to be outside the quotes, and this same modified date is less than or equals to no, what am I doing? So it's less than or equals to another date, depending on the date. Depending on the date, less than or equals to another date, maybe we can say 2025 now, 2025 dash 12-1. So this is that query I'm going to use. But in this case now, our where clause, we are referencing the output of our lookup activity. Remember that our lookup activity has a date, which is 2011 for the new lookup. And then you can also see the output of our old one also, which is 2010. So instead of having to write it manually, we are trying to add some dynamism into our query. So I won't use this because this one is just hard coding. So I'll be using the output of our pipeline. So I will then just copy this code now. So don't worry about expression language in data factory. It comes with experience, so you learn it with time. So but basically you can see that this is the where clause, which is just your regular SQL syntax. Then you can see that it's saying that at activity, then the name of that activity, which is the old watermark activity, dot the output, and then the output of that watermark activity is the first row of the watermark value, and the modified date is less than the second activity, which is your new watermark activity. So I'll just copy this now. So what then this means is that the data that will be copied into our destination is just going to be a data that fits into this filter context. So I'll click on my copy data activity, then I'll come back to source, then I'll change it to query. Then on that query, I'll paste that SQL code together with expression language. But you can always expand this so that you can see it properly. So I have done that. So now we know that this pipeline has been configured for the source. Then we need to configure the destination too. Our destination is going to be a workspace, which is going to be our lake house now. So lake house is fine. It could be from any of these, but lake house is fine. So I will then pick a lake house one, which is the lake house that I created earlier. So I'll click lake house one. So once I click on lake house one, then I'm going to have this place populated for me where I can pick a table that is existing before, or I can actually create a new table, or I can create a new table. So now, or I can even save it as a file. So in my case now, I want to create a new table. So I will just create new. So once I click on new, I'm just going to give that table a name. So I'll call it sales order detail. Then I will click on create. So once I click on create, you can see that the new table has been created for me. Then I have the advanced option where I can either decide to choose if I want to be doing an appending. Appending means that new record, each time that this pipeline runs, every data that is copied will be joined to it. While overwrites, we always do like your drop and truncate. We do like a drop and truncate. So it will delete everything and replace it with what is being copied. So I'm just do override for the first time now. So then my source has been configured appropriately. Then I can come to, I'll stay on my copy activity, then my mapping. So within my mapping, so I want to import the schema from my data source and so I can import schema, which is going to take a while depending on the internet speed. So I think that I made a mistake somewhere. Let me try and trace that. Yes. So yeah, I have specified the code and I've also specified the copy activity. So let me state my copy activity. This is my source, which is a warehouse. Yes, a warehouse source. Then my destination also. So lake house source. Yeah, that's fine. Then I can come to my mapping now. So, but before that, we can always preview the data from our data source. So I can preview this data source. So additional expression. Okay. So give me a minute, please. Let me figure this. Activity. Where is my pipeline? Okay. Not detail where this is greater than this, greater than this. Yeah. So yes. Copy activity. So let me just validate. So that's where validate is important. Instead of having to trace it manually, so I'll click on validate. Then it's going to show me, okay, looks like everything is fine. I guess it was a bug before. So now we can see that there is no error in our pipeline as of now. So now that we've actually put the query to specify the record that we want to pick, so that will sort of filter the record that we are actually loading into the lake house. The next thing that we want to do is that for subsequent loading of data, we want to make sure that the data from their last load is not the same thing that will be loaded in our load. Remember that what we are doing is actually an incremental load. So I will add another activity. So I will add a stop procedure activity. So on this stop procedure activity now, I'm also going to link it to my existing pipeline. So from my copy data activity, I will pick on success, then I will join into my stop procedure activity. Remember that earlier within our warehouse, we created a stop procedure. So for a stop procedure activity too, we can actually rename it and say updating. This is going to be updating watermark table. Watermark table. And then I can come to settings. So under my setting, I have to configure that. Now, where is my stop procedure located? It's actually located on the warehouse that we created earlier. So I'll pick on warehouse, then I'll pick warehouse one, and then I'll pick the name of the procedure. So I'll just do a drop down. So if you have a procedure within your warehouse that you are picking, then all those procedure will actually come out here. Please, by show of reaction, let me know if we are there. You can see my screen, you can hear me. Please let me know if you can hear me, if you can see my screen, and if you're also following. I'm not seeing anybody. Yeah, all right, thank you, Bayo. So, yes, thank you, Taiwo. So now we can see that the procedure that we created is now available. So I'll pick that procedure. So what this procedure is going to be doing is that it's going to be updating this my old lookup table. So now I have just configured that procedure. So now we just have to test our pipeline, and then uh, we see if it's actually going to do the incremental loading. So now we have the pipeline configured. So, but before I run it again, I'll come to my run tab, then I will validate my pipeline. So again, I'll validate my pipeline after configuring my stop procedure, and I can see that there is nothing missing from this pipeline. If there will be any error, I'm going to just be pointed into where the error is after I click on my validation. So now I'll just click on run. So once I click on run, I'll be prompted to save this pipeline. So if I click on save now, then I expect that this pipeline is going to run, and then it's going to actually put data into our lakehouse. So once it's done running, we'll go back into our lakehouse and see our data. So now we have the two lookup activity running, we have the old one, and then we have the new watermark, which is referencing the data that we are actually bringing into our lake house. So the first one is done running. So the second one is in progress. And of course, that one too is done running. Now the copy data too is also running. So it's going to take a while depending on how large the data is. So successfully, so we are waiting for the stop procedure activity to also run. So yes, and that failed, and I think I know why the procedure failed. So now I had picked this procedure, but remember that when we are creating our procedure earlier, we actually defined parameter for our procedure, which I did not provide. So I'll go back here now, and I'll provide that procedure. So for me to provide that parameter now, I have to click on this stop procedure parameter, then I'll click on import. You know, typically when you are running a procedure on SQL, because this is the query that we use to create our procedure. Let me go back to my notepad. This is the procedure. This is the procedure I created. Let me highlight it so that it can be easier for us to see. So I had created this procedure called user rights watermark, and then this procedure I had declared two variables, one for modified date and one for the name of the table. So that means anytime I want to execute this procedure, typically I need to provide the parameter for modified date and table name, which I did not provide. So I'll go back into my pipeline now. So then I had click on import, then I have this. So I have to provide it. You see, I specify that the modified date is a date time. I also specify that the table name is a string. So I'll go back to my notepad where I had actually provided the code for that. So what I will then do is that I'll copy um, this one for the output of the watermark. So this is going to be in a minute, please. Okay, let me just go to the other one I created earlier to get that. So yes, so let me copy it from here. So this is the parameter. So I'll just copy this parameter, which is also a data factory expression language. So I'll do Control C. So I'll go to the tab where we are working. So I'll provide that parameter here for the modified date. So what is modified? The parameter is not just doing. Let me expand so that we can see. Let me also close this. What this thing is doing for us is that it's actually looking up into our activity, and then it's providing the last modified date based on this copy activity. You can see that as activity, look up the new lookup activity, this lookup activity, and then the output, which is also the first row. So second time we are referencing this now. So I'll go back to the one I did earlier before this session. Then I'll cancel that. Then I'll provide the table name too, which is also based on the output of our lookup activity. So I'll do Control C. Then I'll go back to the one that we are creating. Then I'll also paste that value. So once I paste that value now, then I'll try and run my pipeline now. So I believe that now that I've provided all the arguments, the pipeline should run successfully. So the pipeline will run, and hopefully we can continue to do this incremental loading. So again, we have to wait and see which of these activity will run. So two activity, one activity, one store procedure activity. So today now you've learned how to use lookup activity, how to use copy activity, how to use store procedure activity. But before we call it a day, we are still going to use script activity, which is like an SQL script activity where you can just paste your SQL script and then that will continually run your SQL script for you at the specified interval. So the copying is happening right now. So the data has copied successfully. So remember that what we have done now, we can see that all the activities has run successfully. Our our two lookup activity, our copy activity, and also our watermark activity. So we can go back into our workspace now, and then we will see the incremental pipeline. So we have two pipeline now. We have incremental pipeline, then we have the initial load pipeline. So let's go back to our lakehouse, and then we can then see the table that has ingested first. However, we need to test if our incremental loading is actually doing what we have sent it to do. So in this case now, let's wait for the lakehouse to be populated. So this is our lakehouse, and then we can see that we still have 2011 data set. So now to test our pipeline that is working appropriately, we need to go back to that uh, initial load pipeline. So here we have this incremental load. So we have all the lookup activity fully set up. We have the copy activity also set up. We have the stop procedure activity. So, but for us to test this data now, typically we are supposed to have like a pipeline that will be ingesting data into our lake house. And remember that the data in our warehouse is being populated by our lake house. Then we are writing it back into our lake house. So we are going to keep the data in our lakehouse, which is this. We are going to keep it up to date. We are going to keep it up to date with the data that we have from our on-prem source. Remember that we have data for 2012, 2013, 2014, and on like that. So we'll go back to our Fabric environment. Then we just adjust this initial load pipeline to actually bring in the remaining data sets rather. So I'll come back to my workspace, and then inside this folder, I'll come to this initial load pipeline. So we just had to use that to bring data into our lake house. So now we need to populate this lake house again so that our warehouse also can be populated. But I need to open our warehouse so that we can see what is going on. So this is our warehouse also. So within our warehouse, we have this table, which is says other table. So if you come back to our watermark table now, I expect that the modified date is now 2011. Remember that we started with 2010, and our store procedure is going to be updating this watermark table. So if I run it again now, I expect that this watermark table will take the maximum modified date. So I'll go back here into my pipeline and test if the incremental loading is working. So remember that we had created this warehouse based off cross database querying of our lake house. So we need to keep that up to date. We need to keep it up to date. That's where we now need to go back to our initial load. So on our initial load, remember that we had limited the data that we are bringing in here based on date filter using this where clause. But now I don't even want to filter it again. So this time now, every time that our on-prem data source is populated, and each time this our initial load runs, then our lakehouse will be populated, then which is going to cascade into our warehouse. So what will then happen is that now that I have actually created this table, this pipeline rather, I already adjust it, but there is something that we need to do first before we run this pipeline again. So we need to add a script activity. So let's come to activity now. Then I will create a script activity. So this script activity too, I'm going to link into my initial copy activity. So on success, I'll drop it to my script activity. So on my script activity, I will select it. Then I can name this activity to be updating updating my warehouse table, updating my warehouse table. So we have this updating warehouse table script activity. Now your script activity has been named, then you have to come to your setting where you can then configure your script activity again. Where do you want to run your script? Is in a workspace, and in that workspace we have a warehouse. So I'll click on a warehouse. So within that warehouse, I will then paste the query that I want to use. So, but the whole point of this query is that I want this query to be updating based on what I have here. Based on what I have here. So I will go back into my warehouse environment. So I will go back to my warehouse environment, and then I will go back to the queries that I had created to create that table. So I'll come to my SQL query. Remember that we had created that table based on the last thing that was ingested into our warehouse, but we want to keep it up to date. So I'll just create a new SQL query. So I'll click new SQL query, then I'll copy this script that created our table for us, which is this table here. So every time this table is created now, I want it to stay up to date. And what I will then do is I'll come to my notebook. So in my notebook, I will come here. So this is my notebook. I have uh, that query here. Yes, so this is the query. So I'll copy this query now. Then I'll go back to my Fabric environment. So in my Fabric environment, I'll paste this query. So this is the query. So what the query will be doing for me is that since the table that is actually populating my warehouse is coming from a lake house, and that lake house too is going to be populated by this initial load pipeline. So that means my data could be out of sync with the lake house. So the copy on the lake house will be up to date, whereas the copy on the pipeline will not be up to date. So I copy from my on-prem using this pipeline, using this copy activity into my lake house. So when I copy into that lake house, the copy that I did will be based on the last time I did that copy activity. And then I created that table, a copy of it in my warehouse. So in that warehouse, I want that table to be up to date. That is where we are now creating this script activity. And what script are we going to be running in this script activity? That is what we are trying to build. So I'll go back to my warehouse environment where I had pasted that script. So what I'm saying is that this script should drop this table called sales order detail, and then it should now recreate it so that it will allow you to create it, because there is already a sales order detail table. So once you drop it first, then you're going to create it. So now that you are creating it the second time, it's going to be creating it based off the last copy activity that you did. Based on the last copy activity. Remember that the first initial load that we did was for 2011 data sets alone, but we had removed that where clause from our copy activity. We had removed that from our copy activity. So now it's going to be loading everything from our on-prem source. Now in this case now, we expect that the on-prem source will keep growing, and then we want to keep our lake house, which is serving as like a staging environment for the data that we are ingesting. So from there, we can then run this query in our warehouse and see if it's working before we can now use that query within our pipeline. So I'll click on run. So once I click on run, then I expect that this query will first double this table and then it's going to recreate it for me. So if I come on this table now, I will always find my sales order table in my warehouse. So this is my sales order table. So this is my sales order table. So I can then copy this script now. I'll do Control C. Then um, I'll go into my pipeline, which is my initial load pipeline. Then I'll paste this query for my script activity. So under my script activity, I will paste this. Then I can always expand it so that I can have a proper view of what I have done. So now this initial load activity has been modified to always copy the entire thing from our on-prem and stage it into a lake house. And then once that is staging is done into our lake house, a copy of it is sort of created within our warehouse too. Now we are now going to use the other pipeline to now do the incremental load. So now that we have configured our script activity too, then I will try and run it also, where I will first do a validation. Then after doing that validation, I can see that my script has been validated. So let me just validate the entire pipeline. So I will do validate. Then I see that my pipeline has been validated. Then I can click on run. So by show of reaction, let me know if we are following. So let me get water, please. Reaction, comment. Let me know if you can hear me or you can see my screen, please. Can you see my screen? Can you hear me? Can anybody hear me at all? Yeah, thank you, Abdurrahman. Thank you. Thank you. Yeah, thank you. So I will click on save and run. So now I expect that the entire data, thank you, Flora, thank you, Ahmed, the entire data from my on-prem source will be staged into my lake house now, and then is also going to update my warehouse. But however, the incremental loading that we are doing from the warehouse will now be based on the existing data or we have already. So once this one will come back to this initial load pipeline. So let's go to uh, incremental load pipeline. So on this incremental load pipeline, we need to adjust the copy activity also, where we come to our destination. So on that destination, we need to actually do an append instead of overwriting, because in real life situation you expect that people are connected to your data source and they don't want to find an empty table. So instead of overwriting the entire data, which is sort of a drop and truncate statement, you can actually append. What we have there is 2011 data only. So when I do append now, it's going to bring the entire data set. So if our on-prem data set is growing, automatically the staging on the lakehouse tool will also be updated and it's not going to be out of sync. And at the same time, the copy of it that we have in our warehouse tool will be updated using that initial load activity. So I will click on append now. So let me go back to my initial load activity and let's see if it has run successfully. Okay, the copy activity has run successfully. Now let's wait for the script activity also and let's see if it's going to run. So if you have any question, please you can drop your question in the chat so that once I am done, I can actually pick them up and attend to them, or anything that you want me to elaborate more on. So we are waiting for this pipeline to run, and then um, we can then trigger our incremental load and see if the lookup activity is doing what it's supposed to do. So somehow the script activity has failed, so which we are going to find out why. So I don't know why this thing has failed. So let me see. But when we actually run this script in our warehouse, it ran successfully. So why it failed in our pipeline is what I don't understand. So let me try and run it again. Oh, okay. So now, so this is, I think I understand what is going on now. What happened is that I had actually written my table in the warehouse, so saying cannot drop warehouse because does not exist. So let me see the name of the table in the warehouse to be sure. So he's saying the table does not exist. Says other detail. So let me see the table. Yeah, so I get the problem now. So the table I have here is says other table, but my script is actually referencing says other detail, says other detail. So I will just change this one instead of detail. I will change it to, I will just adjust it and add table. So from my lake house, I need to also confirm what this table is named as. So on my lake house, I need to go back to my lake house. So his name has says other detail in my lake house. But when I get to my warehouse, I have name it says other table. So from my lake house, it says other detail, but the table is says other table in my warehouse. So I need to adjust that. So I can then run this query again and see if it's going to run successfully. So if it's running successfully, then I can take it back into my pipeline. So the table has run successfully. So I'll just copy it now. Then I'll go into my initial load. So within my initial load, then I will replace this with the new SQL scripts, which is this. Then I will try and run this again. Let me validate it. It's validated, then I'll click on run. I'll save and run. So once I click on save and run, I expect that this table is going to run and it's going to just give me this. So then the copy activity also, I need to check the destination here and see the advanced option. So yeah, so which is fine. So let's wait for the activity to run successfully. And we can see that our activity is running. So now it's going to take longer because we are copying all the data that we have in our sales table. So once our sales table increases, then we can automate this initial load that will always populate our lakehouse, which is our staging environment. And then we now have the pipeline to do the auto population of both the lake house and the warehouse. So any question, please drop questions for me. If you have any, if you want me to go back on any particular aspect, yeah, I can do that. So we are still waiting for our pipeline to run. So once it's done running, then we will go back to our incremental pipeline and then we will trigger it and then check if it's actually doing the incremental loading. So our pipeline run is still in progress. So I guess it's the internet or it could be a glitch. So let's just wait for it to run. So we are actually done. I just want to test the incremental load if we have new data that is coming into our lake house and also our warehouse. So what we are done today is called because the role for Microsoft Fabric is analytics engineering. So we will take you each of this and deploy it and like and area you like us to also explore. Please feel free to drop that area or anything that you think that you want to learn about. I think we just wait a bit more. So this is the other pipeline. So let's check the initial load pipeline again. I think it's still running. It has run for about 9 minutes now. Let me reload the page so that we won't sleep here. So all right, so it's still in progress. So while that is going, let's even see the number of data that we have on this sales table. So it's just 100,000 records. So I don't know why it's taking so long to actually load. Still in progress. So while that is going, let me just quickly show us one of the how to do mirroring for your database in Fabric environment. So if I go back to my uh, workspace now, in my workspace, I can always switch my experiences. So let's say I'm going to a data warehouse experience. So on your data warehouse experience, you now have all these new feature. So assuming you have like a connection detail for maybe an Azure SQL database. For now, we only have mirroring for Azure SQL database and also for your Snowflake. So if you have like a warehouse in your Snowflake that you want to work with in your Fabric environment, you don't have to do any migration in that case. All you have to do is just to mirror that warehouse in your Snowflake or on your Azure SQL database into your Fabric environment by just clicking on the one that fits your use case. So I'm going to click on mirror Snowflake. So if I click on mirror Snowflake now, I can just call it test mirror. Then I'll click on create. So I will click on create. So once I click on create, then I have this interface where I need to provide the connection string for the snowflake I want to actually mirror into Fabric environment. So once that, so we see that we now have a snowflake database, so I can click on that. And assuming I have access to any production snowflake, all I have to do is to provide the server name, provide the warehouse that I'm trying to mirror, provide the connection details, and boom, I will have access to the entire database. So okay, thank you, Musli. I'm going to answer that. So now there is a new feature in Microsoft Fabric called mirroring. So mirroring is this feature whereby you have an existing database elsewhere. It could be on your Azure SQL database or on your Snowflake database. But you want to have access to that database without necessarily having to copy that data. So Microsoft Fabric has added a mirroring feature whereby you have a sort of a mirror copy of that database in your Fabric environment. So instead of doing a copy activity or whatever means you want to use to copy data from your database, either from your Snowflake or from your SQL or from your Cosmos DB. All you have to do is to come to your warehouse experience, and on that warehouse experience, you come to data warehouse. So assuming that I have any of these three which are possible for mirroring, Azure SQL database, or I want to mirror um from a Snowflake database or from Cosmos DB. So instead of copying, I'm not copying anything, I'm not doing any data movement. My data will still sit in my SQL database, it will still sit in my Snowflake database, it will still sit in my Cosmos DB, but everything that is stored in that database, be it your table, your views, your store procedure, and every other item, every SQL item in that database, you will be able to use them within Fabric warehouse. So you create a sort of mirror of your Azure SQL database into your Fabric environment without necessarily having to copy data from your Snowflake or from your Azure SQL database. So it's just a mirror copy of that data that you have in your Fabric environment, which is very closely related to a shortcut feature in Fabric also. So the idea of Microsoft Fabric, especially one lake within Microsoft Fabric, is that we don't want to have duplicate of data. Say our organization now, we are using Snowflake. We already have a data warehouse. Now the next thing we want to do if you want to migrate to Microsoft Fabric is that we want to migrate that entire warehouse into Fabric environment. And process of migration can actually be very tedious. But instead of having to, because when you do your migration, you first have to copy the tables, copy the schema, recreate all your views, recreate all your procedure, your temporary tables, and every SQL object when you are creating that warehouse in Fabric. But in this case now, we want to even bypass all those. So when you do your mirroring, all objects in your Snowflake, in your Azure SQL will be copied into your Fabric environment like a sort of a link. Assuming I have access to Azure Portal, I would have created a database on Azure Portal, then we would have mirrored it within our Fabric environment, and then we'll be able to interact with it. So let's go back to our initial load activity. Now, so now we can see that our initial load activity. Before I even continue, I hope I'll be able to answer that question mostly. If you still don't get it, you can actually reach out to me, then I can take that question and then explain further. I'll probably even demonstrate it. But I can't use the Snowflake and Azure Portal that I have right now. So we can see that for our initial load activity, the data has been copied, and then this script too is also running. Remember, what the script is doing is to always drop this table and populate it with the latest data from our on-prem data source. So now we know that we have more table in our warehouse, we have more table beyond 2011 in our warehouse, then we can go back into our incremental pipeline and test it. But before you we test it, I want us to all see if this pipeline, if the incremental load is working. So let's go back to our warehouse. So on our warehouse now, remember that when we try to query the the watermark table from our schema, I expect that the last table on our watermark table, based on the procedure that we created, should be for 2011. Should be for 2011. So, but now that we have ingested more data into our into our sales order table, this our watermark value should change to the maximum date from the last time that we are doing ingesting, so that the next incremental loading that we are loading is going to be factoring the last date here, and then it's going to use that to filter. Remember that we did a dynamic filtering with our pipeline earlier. So let's go back to our incremental load. So let's run it again. So I will click on run. Yeah, so we have another challenge here. So one of the lookup activity failed. So we need to find out why. So I'll go back to my warehouse and see why this is failing. So this is my warehouse. Then let me stay on incremental load. Then I'll do my lookup activity, which is the new lookup activity. So sales order table. So now this has changed because our sales is no longer sales order table in our warehouse. So if I go back to my warehouse now, then I need to come back to my schema, and then the name of this table is no longer sales warehouse table. So let me check the appropriate name. So it's now says order table, not says order detail. So I made that mistake. Please, when you are trying to recruit, ensure that you use the appropriate naming convention. However, I'm still going to provide us the code for this session. So I'll put the appropriate name so that you won't run to this kind of error. So I'll just change it to sales order table, not detail. Yeah, so I'll run it again now. And hopefully this time now I hope that I'll be able to pick why this pipeline failed. So my pipeline is running. Yeah, so the two lookup activity are going to run, then it's going to do a copy activity. Now the copy activity now is going to be based on the condition that we have specified using this dynamic content. So we remember that the condition we specify is that it should be based on the output of the lookup activity. And the output of the lookup activity has changed from 2010 to 2011 because we had done one incremental loading. So this one is saying select sales order where modified date is greater than the output of that activity. So now, yes, so the ingestion now is going to be based on this. So I think this might actually fail too because it's no longer says order detail, so it should be table. Yeah, I guess as much. So it should be table. So it should be table. So I think that's okay now. So let me see if my procedure to okay. So that's fine. So I'll click on run. I will save and run. So let me check my procedure on the warehouse side. This. So I'll go to my schema, I'll go to DBO, I'll go to store procedure, or better still, I can just check this the notebook I've been using. So this procedure does not have anything that has to do with sales order table. So let me go back to my fabric environment, and let me go back to uh, incremental pipeline, and let's see if our pipeline has run eventually. So the pipeline is still running. So once it's done running, we can then check our table and see if we have more than 2011 data, because we have specified that it should only do an incremental load for data that is after 2011 and less than the maximum date. And then we also check the procedure too. So the copy has run successfully. So the last thing running now is this stop procedure, which is going to update our watermark table to always keep the record of the last time that this pipeline run, or the record of the last time that data was ingested. So all our activity has run successfully in this pipeline. So if I go back to my warehouse now, we need to get evidence that this is working fine. So I'll query this watermark table now, and then I will do select stop 100, though it's just one record I have here. And then I can see that the last value, which is the maximum value now, is 2014. So by the time I'm doing another incremental load now, it's only going to load data based on this modified data column. Based on modified data column, let me run this query. So based on modified data column, let me just do select all. Select top 100 from this. So based on this modified date column, I remember that I said that we have data for other years too. So, and the maximum year that we have right now is 2014. So next time that incremental loading is going to happen is going to be based on the last date on our table. So it's not going to be loading data for 2011, 2012, 2013, and 2014. Apart from the fact that you are stressing your compute, you are also going to be wasting storage, which of course has some cost implication. So if I go back to my Lakehouse environment now, so every data that will be ingested subsequently is going to be data after the maximum date, and the maximum date in this case is 2014 June and 29th day of 2014. So another evidence that we can use to check if our incremental load is happening is that we can then go back to uh, our warehouse or our lake house. So in our lake house too, we can now say that, okay, let's check the record that we have in our lake house. So in our lake house, I can then say that select, I can switch to the SQL endpoint of our lake house. Then once I do that, then I can select the entire data that we have in our table. So I will do select uh, top 100. But I don't want to do that. I can actually just, I want to do select counts of this table in our lake house. So I'll do Control V, and I will do select count from other table. So here we should find more than 2011 data. So you see that we have more data in our data set now, and of course we can always copy this aggregation into our fabric environment to see if we have more than 2011 data in our fabric environment also. So I'll just press enter, and I'll paste the new one that I copied. However, I know that it's not from this other table. So what I have to do is just to change the from destination. So I'll copy this one, which is the new location of our data in fabric environment, and replace it here. Control V, then I can run this. So I will then see if I have data for all the years within our fabric environment. So boom, so we have data for 2011, 2012, 2013, 2014. So the next incremental reload will not start loading from 2011. We start loading from after 2014, specifically after from 29th of June that we saw in our watermark table. And this brings me to the end. I know it's actually a lot. So what I will also do is I'll also do a documentation of today's session. Then I will put all the code in a GitHub repository that I'm going to share. So from there, we can actually assimilate it. So I believe that with the documentation and the video recording that is I'll be on the YouTube channel, we can actually try and practice along. And then that time, I believe that everything that you are trying to do will be solidified. It's going to solidify your understanding. And if you have any question, really, just tag me on Twitter. If you're on WhatsApp page too, you can also tag me right there, and then I can help you with your incremental loading. So, any question before we call it a day? Did we get anything? Adebola, you are lost. Don't worry, we are going to find you. Cavalry is coming. Any question? Can we hear me, please? A show of comments, reaction, or anything. Please let me know if you can hear me. So I'll give it another 2 minutes. If I don't see any question, I will take it that we are fine and we don't have any question. All right, thank you, Pelumi. Yeah, thank you. Secret Signals Unveiled. Their names, Sha. Thank you, Ahmed Oladapo. Thank you all for coming to this month session of our meetup. And from next month, we'll be bringing other experts in the industry to come and show us one or two things in the community. And also, we might be organizing some session for those that are preparing to write their fabric exam. Now, then let's not forget that we are in Nigeria. If we had enrolled for the AI skill challenge, you should have gotten an email by now informing you that you earn a brief voucher to take your fabric exam, or as the case may be. Um, as the case may be. So just let us know any help you do. So Flora is saying let's do in person next time. Yes, we would have loved to do it. And in fact, trying to do it in person is why it take longer before we started our meetup this year. We're trying to secure a venue, and if anybody can help us in securing a venue, our old hosts, they are no longer willing to give us that venue. So, but if you have any venue that you think might be suitable, please let us know. The venue that we got was just going to take about 20 people, and that will not be sustainable because we don't want to have some people left out. So I believe that if we are doing it virtually, pending the time we are able to get another venue, everybody will be carried along and then people will not be lost. But Flora, if you have any question, please you can just reach out to me. Adebola too, let me know. I'll just do a documentation about it and so you can reach out to me, reach out to Pelumi or follow us on Twitter also if you want to join the community so that we can add you to the WhatsApp community. So follow us on Twitter, subscribe to this YouTube channel, send message on Twitter so that we can add you to the WhatsApp page. So in absence of any other question, so I think Pelumi is back. In absence of any other question, I think we might just call it a day. We might call it a day, and then hopefully next month we are going to have another very wonderful session. So all right guys, bye. Thank you for coming. Thank you. I hope it's worth your time. Thank you very much. See you guys next month. So before I go, I want to drop the link to our Twitter page so that people that want to be added to the community on WhatsApp can get access to us. So follow us on Twitter also so that you can get regular updates. So I'm dropping the link to follow us on Twitter. So once you follow us on Twitter, drop a message so that I can share the link to join the WhatsApp community with you. So I just dropped the link in the chat. So follow us on Twitter and then from there we can pick it up so that we can add you to the WhatsApp community. Thank you everyone. See you next month. So Ahmed, that's the link. So that's the link. Follow us on Twitter, then we'll pick it up. Thank you everyone. See you next month. Bye. Let me wave. Bye.